All right. Well, welcome to Greenlee Art Space's Artist Talk by Peggy Fontenot. So my name is Kimberly Hawking, and I'm the director and curator of Greenlee Art Space. For those of you who don't know us yet, welcome to Greenlee Art Space, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to enriching lives and cultivating community through art. This is done through creating contemplative art shows, bringing art to the community, and providing a space for art making, mentoring, and art therapy. For those of you who do know us, welcome back. We're so happy to greet you today. Thanks for being here with us. So this presentation is thanks in part to Greenlee's local impact grant from the California Arts Council. This grant serves to highlight the artwork of underrepresented populations. As a recipient of this grant, we are working with Neshkinukat, a California Native American artist network. We are having a closing with storytelling and song on November 29th at 11 a.m. that you won't want to miss. So see our website and social media postings for more info on this. We would like to thank the California Arts Council for their generous support. We would also like to thank the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture for their operational grant and recent COVID relief grant, which has helped us keep our physical gallery space in Signal Hill. Finally, I'd like to thank our many individual and monthly donors. You guys are the heart and soul of this organization, and without your support, we would not be able to continue to serve artists and the community. If you appreciate programs like this one, please support Greenlee by going to our website after this presentation to make a donation. So Greenlee Art Space has installed We Are All Related, an exhibition of Neshkinukat artists at our gallery space. This exciting exhibit has many different types of Native American artwork. We have 3 of Peggy's photographs, as well as 2 of her beaded art pieces on display at this exhibit, which is now available for viewing by appointment. Today's presentation will be in the format of an interview. So artist Gail Werner will be interviewing Peggy Fontenot. A little bit about Gail. She earned her MFA in drawing and painting from California State University, Long Beach in 1985. She is a painter working in oil and encaustic. She also specializes in the monotype printmaking process. The Southern California desert and mountain landscape, plant and animal life, and cultural elements related to her Native American background inspire her work. She is part Cupeño, Luiseño, and Kumeyaay, 3 tribes located in Southern California. Peggy Fontenot is a professional award-winning Native American photographer, beadwork artist, silversmith, and activist who is based in Los Angeles. Her work has been exhibited nationally since 1983 in such prestigious settings as the Smithsonian's Museum of the American Indian, New Mexico Museum of Art, Southwestern Association for Indian Arts, the Eiteljorg and Heard Museums, the Autry National Center, the Briscoe Museum, the Utah Museum of Natural History, the Cahokia Mounds Museum, the Museum of History and Art Ontario, the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum, and the Queen Mary. Fontenot's photographs document relevant social issues, including that of Native people and veterans. Forgoing digital imagery, she remains devoted to film. To further strengthen her perspective, she processes her own prints in her wet darkroom using a split filter technique. Her beadwork and silverwork designs have been featured in magazines, Sports Illustrated calendars, and on television. The Smithsonian's Museum of the American Indian, the Autry National Center, the Pueblo Grande Museum, and Bazaar del Mundo currently offer her work for sale. Museums not only employ her to teach, they have employed her to repair and restore vintage and antique beaded items. Fontenot has received numerous awards for her photography, which include the Autry National Center, the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts, the Heard Museum, the Eiteljorg Museum, Cahokia Mounds Museum, the Millard Sheets Gallery, the annual Black and White Spider Awards, and the International Photography Awards. Her beadwork has garnered her awards at the Autry National Center, the Heard Museum, the Eiteljorg Museum, the Briscoe Museum, Red Earth, California Indian Show, the Santa Monica and Pasadena Indian Ceremonial Shows, as well as being awarded an LA Treasures Grant and Surf Grant. Peggy Fontenot has a keen eye for the world in which we live. Many of her photographs capture the lived and living experiences of Native Americans today. Her camera work brings to light the faces and stories of some of the darker aspects of life in America. But her work also captures the beauty, honor, and joy that it is to be part of our reality. In addition to photography, Peggy is also known for her stunning beadwork and silver jewelry. The designs of her creations reflect the Native culture of which she is a part and are an enduring testament to its beauty and resonance. I admire her dedication to her craft, her use of art as a form of social activism, and her incredible eye for photographs, which are both poignant and powerful. Let's all welcome Gail and Peggy. Yay!
Thank you, Kimberly, and welcome everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today to speak with Peggy Fontenot about some of her amazing photos and beadwork. We've divided her work into 4 sections: activism and protests, Native politics, Native customs and lifestyles, and lastly, veterans. We will present a slideshow of her work from each section, then talk about some of the work individually. Don't forget that if you have any questions along the way, to make sure to put them into chat. So let's get started. First of all, Peggy, what is your tribal affiliation? And please tell us a little bit about your family history.
Good morning, and I thank you for coming, and thank you for those who are in attendance. I'm a member of the Potawatomi tribe of Virginia, and I am Potawatomi and Cherokee descent. My family names are Lightfoot, View, Duncan, and Jones. My mother was born in Mishawaka, Indiana, and my father was born in Detroit, Michigan, where the Potawatomi originate. My mother met my father when her brother brought him home on leave, and he was stationed in California. So when she moved to California to be with him, her parents followed. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and both sets of my grandparents lived in the Beaumont area in California, but my mother's parents also lived quite a bit of their time on the Kushan Indian Reservation. And when they passed, they both passed there. And my grandmother was honored by the Kushan tribal women who she spent a lot of time with. And when she passed away, they made a circular piece of beadwork, and what it represented was the fact that my grandmother had come full circle. She had lived her whole life, and now she was moving on. And Daisy Sims, who is a native treasure of the Kushan Nation, presented me with the beaded piece, and I'm very honored that they recognized her, they recognized my family, and they presented that item to me.
Thank you, Peggy. That's a beautiful story about the Circle of Life beadwork that was presented to you. It was really beautiful. At this point, we're going to move forward into our first section, our first slideshow on activism and protest. Okay, I wanted to start off by asking you, from the first two photos, what's the history behind those photos that I believe were taken at Alcatraz Island?
The Fort Laramie Treaty stated that when property becomes surplus, it will revert back to the Native people. So Alcatraz being a prison, when the prison closed, a group of Native activists decided to occupy the island to negotiate having the property returned to the Native people. This was the first image, Indians Welcome, was what you first saw as all Native people started to join the occupation, which lasted about 17 months. Today, we look at the image as satirical. It implies that all Indians and Native people are welcome in the US penitentiary. The second image is of Adam Fortunate Eagle. He was one of the original occupiers and organizers of the occupation. And I thought that this image, which I took at the 35th anniversary, was interesting due to the contrast between him walking with the park ranger. Eventually, the Native people were removed off the island, and it did not become a cultural center like we had hoped. It became one of the world's largest tourist attractions. And afterwards, even though it gave Native people a real voice from that point forward, the talks broke down and we didn't get what we were seeking.
And I believe you did have work shown there?
I did. I did a retrospective of the occupation. My work was on the island for 3 months, and it was kind of funny because the images were locked in the jail cells so that nobody could get to them. So it just kind of furthered the humor that the original photograph has. And the show was called Art from the Rock. And this past November, let me back up. Every November, the Native people on Thanksgiving morning can go to the island before it opens to have ceremonies. And this year we went because it was the 50th anniversary of the occupation.
I remember the whole scene very well. I grew up in the Bay Area, and I was pretty young when it happened, but I did have a cousin who was there.
Yes, I had family there.
Yeah. Well, next I'm really struck by all of your portraits, but in this section, the portrait of Chief Rolling Thunder and Child. And I was wondering if you can tell us about him.
Chief Rolling Thunder was a World War II veteran and a Creek native. And he became very disgruntled with the American government. So he married for a second time, a young wife, and he went out into the middle of the Nevada desert, Imlay, Nevada, and he decided to build a monument to the Native people. So what he did is he went in a 50-mile radius of the monument, collecting what he considered to be white man's trash, and he built a monument with over 300 Native statues. As you can see here, it's a bizarre place. It's reminiscent of the Watts Towers, actually. And people that were either traveling from Reno to Utah or vice versa, they would stop. Some had broken down, and some just stopped to visit. And he allowed them to work on the monument. in exchange for feeding them and housing them. And one couple ended up staying 5 years. And as you can see in this image, the rock house, the windows are actually car windshields that he found within that 50-mile radius. So eventually, his young family started to grow up and move away. But to add insult to injury, his young wife decided to run off with somebody from the Bureau of Land Management. His oldest son that we're friends with, his wife wasn't very fond of Chief Rolling Thunder. And in the middle of the night, one night, Chief Rolling Thunder called his son, and his wife said, "Don't you realize it's 3 o'clock in the morning?" So Chief Rolling Thunder hung up the phone, and that night he took his own life. Now, since then, because we're friends with the oldest son, we've gone there and we've garnered interest, and we've been able to establish the monument as a historical site. So if you're ever in Imlay, Nevada, you should stop by and visit. It's quite incredible.
Well, it's quite a dramatic story, and I look forward to someday being able to take a road trip to go see it. Your next two photos address the protests around the Dakota access pipeline. And if you could just give some history and background on that.
Actually, I was in Utah doing a show, and I was getting ready to head to the Dakotas to photograph the protest. The protests are about pipelines traveling underneath the earth and underneath our rivers from the Dakotas to Illinois. And the Native people and all people are concerned that water and oil don't mix, and it not only affects Native water, it affects all of our water. And as you can see in the images, the diversity of the people that are protesting the pipelines. And not only does it affect that, it affects sacred Native sites. So it's a very important issue in Native country, and it's been slowly moving along. And then in this image, because I had come back to LA from the Utah show rather than going to the Dakotas, this protest was in LA, as in many other cities across the United States. And when I went to develop this particular image, there was a Native man right in the center of the image. And it turned out that he just happened to be in LA, and he just happens to be the nephew of a dear friend of mine who's a famous Pueblo sculptor. This individual's name is Jack Fragua, and my friend who's the nephew is, his nephew is the Cliff Fragua.
Well, they're both powerful photos, and those are two photos that are in the show at Greenlee. And I was curious about when you take a photo such as this, when you're just out in the field, so to speak, what kind of lens do you use? And also later in the darkroom, do you crop your images or try to use what you have captured?
Well, first I use a Nikon N90 camera, and the lens that I'm shooting with for the majority of the time is a 50mm. And when I shoot, I only take a couple of frames, if that, of each image. And so I try to crop when I take the image. It's once in a while I do crop in the darkroom, but you can always go back to my negative and reference what was there.
And then also, for the most part, your work is black and white, and there are some exceptions, like the photos of your granddaughter, Ella Rose.
Yes.
And if you want to just give us a little information on these photos of Ella Rose.
Well, Ella Rose, to me, it's very important to pass down to your children and your grandchildren a sense of responsibility to speak for, so that they have a voice and they give other people a voice as well. So these images were taken at one of the women's marches, and Ella carried a sign and she said, "Your future's in my hands," which is a true statement. And she's quite the activist, and she is quite political, which at times embarrasses her parents. And she's quite the up-and-coming artist. Her and her brother have participated at the Autry Indian Market with me. And last year, actually, both of them took away a first place prize for their art pieces. I was very proud of them. And one of Ella's pieces that actually won at the Autry is in the Greenlee show. And she addresses the missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. And she's all of 11, but she's very aware. That's it. She handmade all these pieces, all the little dresses, braided the hairs, made the necklaces, placed her little items, and wrote out what she wanted. And she painted the box. And unfortunately, on the side, there's a dream catcher with feathers that are falling. And she was really fortunate. My neighbor, Gwen Henry, taught her how to do stippling. So it's all hand done by her, and it came out quite beautiful. I was proud of her.
Oh, as you should be. And seeing the photos of her and her work does give us hope for our future generations. Really nice. Well, again, most of your work is black and white, and I wanted you to speak a little bit about black and white versus color. And also, I was looking on your website about using the split filter technique, and I haven't a clue what that is, so I was hoping you could also explain that.
All right. I shoot with film, first of all, because the subject matters that I'm addressing to me are serious and they're historical. So you will have my negative for generations to go back and see that what I shot was actually what you're seeing. And I mean, of course, I can take those negatives and I can create digital files with them and manipulate them. But again, you'll be able to see that my negative, what I shot was actually there. The reason I shoot with black and white is because my subject matter is so serious. And to me, color is a distraction. I don't want you to look at something that's serious and go, "Oh, isn't that pretty?" I want you to be drawn in, and black and white generally draws you in, and you have an understanding that it's serious. Several of the shots, like the ones with Ella, we were, at the protest. And although I took those in black and white with my film, those were shots that I took with my iPhone that I could quickly post to Facebook to show that we're out there and making noise. And the split filter technique that I use is a process in the darkroom where when you have your enlarger set up, you have your negative, and then when you expose the image onto your paper, what I'm doing is I'm using, independently of each other, different filters. So I use a filter for the shadows and a filter for the highlights. And they're independently of each other, but one will bring in the blacks and one will bring in the grays, and that will make your whites pop And I don't know if you want to go back to Rock House. Here it is. You can see how the white clouds just really pop and the sky looks, you know, very dark. And those are the effects. It makes the image very black and white and moody. So I tend to always use that process.
Thank you. Okay. The next section we're going to move on to is around Native politics. So we'll show a slideshow of those works. I wanted to start with the first two works that are your beadwork. And I really love how you've taken a traditional art form and turned it into a contemporary piece that addresses some pretty serious issues. From Colonial Status, if you could explain what the terms on there, they say enrolled, certified, and descent, and what that means.
The term enrolled refers to any Native individual who is enrolled in a federal or state recognized tribe. The term certified, you'll find in it's a designation in the 1990 Indian Arts and Crafts Act, which states that for whatever reason, if you cannot be enrolled in a federal or state tribe, but you can prove heritage to those tribes or one of those tribes, that they have a process in which they can certify you so that you can legally offer your work for sale as a Native person. The term descent comes from, it's like in the beginning I said that I'm Patawomic, Cherokee, and Potawatomi. We can only be enrolled in one tribe, and therefore, if I want to acknowledge the other tribes legally as an artist, I can say that I am Cherokee and Potawatomi descent. If I don't put the word descent after that, you can be fined by the Indian Arts and Crafts Board because it's implying that you are a member of those tribes. So it's very complicated and very political in Indian country.
And then in Colonial Status, or not in Colonial Status, I'm sorry, but in Missing and Murdered, what is the Highway of Tears and also Savannah's Act?
The Highway of Tears is a 400-mile stretch of highway in British Columbia where a lot of Native women have gone missing and have been found murdered from the 1970s forward. And they really don't know how many have gone missing. Savannah's Act is named after a Savannah Gray Wind, who was a 22-year-old Native woman who was 8 months pregnant. Her neighbor lured her to her apartment, and once there, she knocked Savannah down, and Savannah hit her head and became unconscious. During that time, the neighbor proceeded to cut Savannah from hip to hip to remove her baby. Unfortunately, Savannah woke up during that time, and the neighbor and her boyfriend then strangled her to death. Savannah's body was dumped in a river, and the baby they found in the same apartment 4 days later, thankfully alive and well. And she's now living with her father and is 3 years old. So Savannah's Act brought the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children to the forefront. And the act is designed to make federal agencies and tribal agencies and local agencies share information and speak with each other.
Well, your beadwork pieces are extraordinary for their message, but also really for their technique, which I wanted you to be able to tell us a little about. I do see that you do have your loom there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And I know these are pretty large pieces, so if you could tell us more.
First off, quite a few years ago, I was watching a show called Antiques Roadshow, and they were showing a woman, Lorena Bulworth's, a sampler that she had made. She was 55 years old, and when her mother passed, she wanted to live with her brother, and her brother didn't want to have that responsibility. So it was legal at the time, and he put her into an asylum. So her 8-foot sampler, they call it a rant, but what she did is she made this cross-stitch sampler to tell about her life and others' lives in the asylum and the atrocities that took place. So when I saw this, it really sparked me, and I thought, well, what an interesting way to tell the story. So that's what I've done here. I decided to make samplers out of beadwork, and originally samplers were designed to teach women and girls how to sew and how to do their alphabet and learn their numbers. So I just thought taking something old and something that would have been used in the boarding schools to teach our Native children those same items, that now I would tell our story and put our issues out by doing the same thing. So the first piece that I did, it took me a year to design. That was the Colonial Status. It takes quite a lot of work to take a few beads and make an image. And there's, in most of the pieces, there's 25,000 beads or more. They take about 200 hours to make. The loom itself, what I'm doing is I'm doing beaded loom work to create them. So as you can see, all the warp threads, to just thread the loom takes about 4 hours. So, and and the design and the picking your colors, and so this is the piece that's on the loom. This is what it'll look like when it's complete. Although I thought about altering it a little bit and putting masks on the Native couple at the bottom. I haven't decided yet, just to show the times we're living in. But this piece addresses how Native people are taking a bite out of the poison red apple. They are, it addresses Indian identity, and there's a lot of politics in Indian country that if you're enrolled in a tribe, you're more than somebody who's not enrolled in a tribe. There are shows which you can see in this piece, like the Indian market in Santa Fe. A lot of the shows, they don't go by the guidelines of the Indian Arts and Crafts Board, and they eliminate people who otherwise would be able to identify and sell their work as native made. So this whole piece is addressing issues like that. And federal tribes versus state tribes, and certified versus enrolled. So it all goes back. They all have a consistent theme, although addressing different issues within them as well.
Well, they're certainly very unique works, and I look forward to seeing more in the future in this series. I think it's a really strong group of work.
Thank you.
There's the photo vote I wanted to talk about, since obviously we've just had an election, and now more than ever, the Native vote is significant. I mean, and Native Americans came out in force for this election. So I was wondering if you could just tell us, and there's quite a history in regards to voting with Indigenous people. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about that.
I actually took this photo years ago when I was in DC, and we were getting out the Native vote. It was an election year. And to me, not only as a woman, but as a Native person, it's very important to exercise your right to vote. The Native people were not made citizens of this country until 1924. And the last two states, which actually were Arizona and New Mexico, that recognized Native votes didn't happen until 1948. And as you said, this year was a very important election, and the Native vote helped turn Arizona blue this year. So this image, to me, couldn't be more timely.
Exactly. And the next photo was kind of close to my heart because it's about Indian boarding schools. And my grandmother and her sister, when they were, I think they were about 5, 4, 5, 6, were rounded up and forcibly taken to a boarding school in it's called St. Boniface, was in Banning. And then later, as they grew older, they were at the Sherman Indian Boarding School, which is in Riverside, and that school still is running. And then later, my mother and her siblings went to Sherman, but at that point, it was a choice. You could go there or go to public school. Anyway, I thought that was a really interesting photo, and I didn't know where it was taken and wondered about that.
Well, Nadia Little Warrior and Jack Johnson and I were driving to Indiana for the Eiteljorg Indian Show. And normally we take Highway 40, but for some reason we got off the beaten path and we were in the upper part of Oklahoma when I spotted these signs and I took them. And I was remiss in stopping and getting the name of the school as we were on a schedule. But I did take the cross streets of where I took them, and I intend to go back and get the name of the school. I did photograph, I believe it was over 180 graves at the Carlisle Indian School of children that died there, if you will. And that's also where a relative, Jim Thorpe, and his brother went. And most people don't know that Jim Thorpe was a twin. And on one of their journeys running away from the school at 6 years old, Jim Thorpe's brother became sick and he died. So that was pretty tragic. And like you said, you know, with the boarding schools, it always bewilders me that Jim Thorpe would then in turn send his daughter to a boarding school. Gracie Thorpe was the youngest child at the Sacred Heart boarding school in Oklahoma, and she said that she actually used to sleep with the nuns. I don't know if they felt sorry for her or what have you. But the Indian boarding schools were designed in the 1860s to assimilate Native children, and when they arrived, their hair was cut, their clothes were changed, they were abused if they were to speak their language, and many of them were sexually abused, physically abused, and many were killed. And a lot of the children actually had allotments in some states, and the children were taken and they were killed, and the schools or the individuals would take over their allotments. So it's a pretty sad history, and the trauma it has been passed down to their children and grandchildren, and it's generational, and it's what we're doing on the border to children today. And I'm just happy that it is something that we're addressing. One of my good friends, Susan Hudson, she is a quilter, and her quilts address these issues. If you ever get a chance to look at her work.
Yeah, a devastating policy.
Yes.
And yet, despite that, Indigenous people continue today to thrive and revitalize culture. And that brings us to our next section, which is about Native customs and lifestyles. One that I wanted to talk about was the urban chiefs and how that one came about.
Okay, and before I address that, I want to make a comment about what you were saying about how we as Native people thrive. And that's where the saying comes, you thought you were burying us, but we were the seeds. So we grow and we are thriving. And this image I took when I was in Oklahoma in 2008. I was at the Red Earth event. And every year before the market opens, they have a parade of all the dancers and the chiefs. And these are Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs. And they were sitting there, and I got lucky and saw it and took their image. And a lot of people, you know, they think that Native people don't exist anymore. So they think that this is an old image, but when they start to really look, they realize that they're wearing tennis shoes and sunglasses, and realize it's a contemporary image. So the chiefs that are there, I have all their names, I know who they are, and typically when I photograph, I typically ask people's permission, but because this is street photography and it's there for anybody to take the photo, but I still printed each one of them a limited edition print for their own. So.
And so, since you consider it street photography, I mean, they're not posing for you, you're just taking spontaneous shots.
For the most part, all of my work are spontaneous.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then do you take many photos of that particular scene, or you just try to capture it quickly?
For the most part, my images, I take just a couple of shots, and I'm always hoping that when I get to the darkroom that I've captured what I saw, and that it works out. And this one, it definitely worked out. There was another one that you showed where there was a mother holding a cradle board, and I had asked her, I didn't want to impose on that moment with her and her baby. So I asked her if I could photograph her. So although it wasn't staged, she was sitting there and she was rocking him. And I got very lucky because I figured the image would be blurred. But not only was it crisp, but the baby was looking right at me. So I was thrilled when I got into the dark room and got that outcome. Thank you for showing that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful photo. His eyes are so striking. Now I'll get to the one that I was going to ask about, that is our last section, which is on veterans, which is very fitting since we had just finished celebrating Veterans Day. Okay, so the striking portrait of Rex Puyama, he was the last Hopi code talker during World War II. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about him, and then also about the history of the code talkers.
Well, Rex was a friend of mine and Jack Johnson's, and we were at his house in Hopi one day, and there was a picture of somebody in a uniform, and we asked who that was, and he said it was him. So we were surprised because he never talked about his service, which is what the code talkers were told to do. There were 19 different tribes that were code talkers, which most people don't know. And they were utilized in World War I as well as World War II. And they used their language, which is ironic because when you go to boarding school, you're taught not to use your language. But at any rate, they used their language to defeat the enemy in World War II. But they were told to go home and not speak about their service, and they didn't. So anyway, at this particular time, Jack and I had formed a nonprofit organization called America's Veterans. And one of our goals was to interview veterans, living veterans, so that we got the real truth about what took place in their lives. So we were able to ascertain an interview with Rex and his son, and it's both in Hopi and in English. And he was the last Hopi code talker. And one day we were driving down the highway and we passed each other, and he stopped. And because what had happened is he had never received his benefits, and through our organization, we helped him to get his benefits. And he showed us his glasses and he said, now I can do what I always wanted, what I continue to do, what I always wanted, have been doing. And that was that he was a famous Hopi moccasin maker. So here in his 90s, he was still making sacred Hopi moccasins. So we were very proud of him and proud to be a part of that. So that's Rex.
Oh, that's great. And well, I guess another irony might be that some of the guys that served weren't even able to vote. That's very possible.
Exactly. Very ironic.
Well, you produced a book called Collateral Damage that's available through blurb.com. And this is an 80-page book of black and white photos and interviews from vets from World War II to the present. And this is quite an undertaking with having interviews as well. So what drew you to this subject matter, and how did that book come about?
Well, I was drawn to the subject matter of veterans because my good friend, Jack Johnson, who was also my neighbor, who's a Vietnam veteran and a member of the Potawatomi Nation, lost his house in a real estate scam. So I went to him and I asked him if I could document what was going on, and he agreed. And then I had an opening, and the show called Secrets Behind the Wall was at the opening. There was over 100 images in the exhibit. And it was at that time that he realized he had post-traumatic stress disorder. He always knew there was something wrong, but he never could put his finger on it. And my artist statement and my exhibit addressed those issues. So then what happened is we learned that over the West LA VA, which was dedicated to the veterans after the Civil War, was being sold off and privatized. So we formed a nonprofit called Citizens for Veterans Rights, and every Sunday for a year we were out there fighting and protesting, and in the end we were able to stop the privatization, and we got a new 400-bed unit built. And from Citizens for Veterans Rights, then we went on to form America's Veterans, which was designed not only to help veterans with housing and benefits, but also to document their stories and their images. And we became partners with the Library of Congress's Veteran History Project. So those interviews are now housed there. And so what I did is I decided to take some excerpts out of those stories and images from World War II through current, and make the book, which is self-published and print on demand. And the proceeds will go back into the organization to continue to help veterans. And in the book, you'll see non-natives, you'll see natives, you see children, you'll see Holocaust survivors. One of my favorite images is of Gracie Thorpe. We were at her sister Gail's funeral, and Gracie said, "Take a picture of me in front of my headstone." So as you can see in the headstone, the death date is blank. Unfortunately, she passed since then, but she was a funny individual, and I felt honored that she wanted me to take this image of her.
And then there was one more image I just wanted to, and Dawn, unless there were some others that you wanted to speak about, but I just thought it was another beautiful portrait, and that was of Mildred Garvey.
I wanted to show that women participated in all wars. They were support systems. They helped bring troops in and out of country. They were nurses, they were secretaries, they were and they've advanced up until now where they can actually participate in conflicts. And it was surprising in our work that most women didn't want to be interviewed. But Mildred was one that I was lucky enough to get her interview, and I just wanted, I included her to thank her for her service, and again, like I said, to show that women were a major part of the different conflicts and wars that take place in this country.
Well, thank you for that wonderful work on the vets and for all of your work. I really appreciate your giving voice through your art and activism to the many issues that are relevant to Indigenous people today and in the past, and really that's relevant to all of us. So thank you so much, Peggy, for sharing your powerful work, your knowledge and your stories. And I'm looking forward to seeing your future work. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to pass it over to Kimberly.
All right. Well, yeah, we're so grateful. Grateful to you, Gail, for interviewing today. Thank you so much for the work that it took to put that together. And thank you, Peggy, for just sharing from your multitude of knowledge. I want to give a big shout out to my son, Nathan, right here, who was the magic hands controlling, going back and forth. So bravo, Nathan. Thank you so much. You did a great job. And thank you also to my husband, Dave, who you can pop in behind here. He's usually the behind the scenes person who he does a ton of work with putting together all the slides and making sure that they look really nice and helping me to practice what I'm going to say. So he's really kind of the hands and feet that make this happen. So thank you so much. And also thank you to Kat High, who I'm not sure if she's still here with us or not, but thanks, Kat. We appreciate you, just all your work for the Native Americans. Bravo. All right, we're going to go to some questions here. And so I'm going to read through them. And if there's anything you want to ask further questions on, please do. So the first question is from Nate Love. And he says, he's asking Peggy, who is your favorite photographer and why?
That's, I have a name and of course it escapes me at the moment. No, it comes back. Diane Arbus. I really like her work. Her work was moody and dark, and she seemed to capture the essence of everyday life. And so I really appreciate her work. The other is Edward Curtis, only because he thought he was photographing a dying people, and fortunately he was not.
All right, great, thank you. That's wonderful. Those are some great photographers. So, yeah. All right, so basically we have a question here from Gwendolyn Henry, and she asks, one may look at your beaded pieces and not know they are actually beads. What was the premise behind your design? And she had a question about, I guess, the sampler. So maybe, is there one that you'd want us to bring up, Peggy? I mean, we can have you answer the question, but do you want us to bring up one of the ones that's like a close-up of the beads, or which one?
You could bring up Colonial Status, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, we'll bring that up for you guys. And so you can really kind of see the beads in that. So there we go. Is that Colonial? Let's see. He's going to share it here. You want to share it?
Whichever one's easiest to bring up. I can talk about either.
Okay.
And I did put a close up. Yeah, there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
There
we have
we
a close up of this one. It's not. It's missing and murdered. So. But,
so what exactly is the question?
The question was just, I think, asking, basically wanted to know more about the premise behind your design And I think she might have been asking more about the new design that you're doing. The sampler is filled with words and symbols was another part of her question. Words, numbers, and what do they represent? So
I don't know if you can bring up the one that shows the whole sampler.
sure, yeah. You know which one she's talking about,
Oh.
sweetie.
You mean the one that you're working on currently?
This one is
the current one she's working on. So
Okay.
give us just a second, we'll get over there. And if we're not getting it right, Gwendolyn, you can you can chat at us more. So hopefully we're getting your, yeah. So go ahead, Peggy.
So what I was going to say is all of the samplers have a running theme. And the theme is, again, the self-assimilation. And I believe what Gwen is referring to is the fact that several years ago, the state of Oklahoma decided to pass a bill which limited who could sell their work as native made. So what I did is I challenged the state of Oklahoma, and their bill eventually was found to be unconstitutional and contrary to the federal Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Unfortunately, while I was challenging the bill in Oklahoma, the same bill was passed in Missouri. I'm currently challenging that bill, and we're waiting for the outcome of the results of that. So each of these samplers address that because we are angry that the government wanted to assimilate us, yet Native people are doing that to each other. And one of the ways that we've spoken about is the fact that we have Indian gaming. And at the time that Indian gaming was coming in, I was all for Indian gaming because I thought it would give Native people a voice in Washington. And what it actually did was it turned family against family, and tribes have disenrolled in members from their tribes. So one day you're Native and one day you're not Native. And the other issue is that, you know, if you're a member of a federally recognized tribe versus a state recognized tribe, you're less than. If you're certified, you're less than. So these samplers are addressing Native identity throughout them, while addressing other issues that are going on, such as the murdered and missing Indigenous women, boarding schools, etc.
All right. Well, we do have a little bit more time if there's anyone who have any further questions. Peggy, I have a question for you. I wanted to know where do you have your darkroom set up, and yeah, was it quite difficult to do? How do you keep that up and continue to get supplies and things like that? It's something I've wanted to do for a while as a photographer, and I'm just really interested. Where is your darkroom, and how do you do it? So.
Well, I used to print at public darkrooms. Of course, then digital came in and altered our world. But with that said, when I would be getting ready to print for an exhibit, and you've got students that are putting their prints into your same chemicals, and they're poking their prints rather than flipping them nicely, I realized that I needed to build my own darkroom. So Jack and a couple of other friends, George Durr and Steve Burns, and I, excuse me, we all went in and we bought a tough shed, put it in the backyard, and put our equipment in, and it's a beautiful, large, dark room, and we all print.
That's great. That's amazing. So yeah, the chat function is located, in just in case anybody doesn't know, the chat function is at the bottom of your screen. I'm gonna go back to us for a minute. The chat function is at the bottom of your screen. So it's just right next to, it says like participants and chat. So if you click on your screen, you can go ahead and click on that, and then you can type questions in case you don't know already where that's at. So, all right, let's see. Well, we'll wait just a couple more minutes here to see if anybody else has questions, but this has been really great to hear so much about the background and history behind so many of those photographs. Let's see. I feel like I should be doing the Jeopardy theme or something. Okay.
See a one by the chat. What does that mean?
What's that?
There's a one by the chat button down here.
That means there's one new message that has come in. That was the reason why I had sent out that message of feel free to put them in the chat, was so that the little thing would pop up so people would know where the chat was.
Yeah, good job, Nathan. He has that technological know-how. All right, here we go. We have one from Naomi. How can we purchase Collateral Damage? So how can they purchase that?
Well, because it's a print on demand, you can go to blurb.com and you can type in Collateral Damage with my name. And when you order it, they will actually print the book for you.
Great. So we're putting that into the chat so that people can see that. And I'll try to also put up later like a link or something on our website, and maybe something on our social media. So if people are interested in purchasing that. Is that one of the images that was in there that said Collateral Damage on it? Is that part of the book, Peggy?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
okay.
for Bosnian Relief.
Okay. I think Nathan's going to pull that up real quick just to show it. So can you tell us a little bit about this image?
Yes, it was shot for Bosnian Relief, and she is collateral damage in the war. So, you know, as everybody that served in the war is collateral damage, but I thought it was striking to name a child as collateral damage. It just has an impact. I felt it had an impact. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think we're probably, yeah, just about done. We'll go ahead and put the information into the chat in case people are wanting to know about how to purchase that. And I think that'd be a really great way to support Peggy. And you're welcome to come and see Peggy's work here at Greenlee. So it's going to be up until the 29th of November. And we're also going to have a really great time of storytelling and songs. So Kat High is going to participate in that. And Dennis, I'm forgetting his last name, but we got, do you remember, Gail?
Garcia?
Dennis Garcia, yeah. So he's agreed to come and do here actually to Greenlee to do the storytelling and songs. So you guys can participate in that via Zoom. We'll have that up on our Eventbrite page soon. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone. And we'll put in all the information that you need as far as Greenlee Art Space. We'll put that up in just a minute. So bravo to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
Hi, Peggy. It's Ken Lubis, and I just want to say outstanding job. You did great.
Thank you.
Peggy,
It was
I thought I knew you, but now I know so much more about you. That's outstanding. Outstanding. Beautiful.
Thank you so much. Nice seeing you.
Thanks for sharing.
I guess if anyone wants to share private thank yous or tell Peggy something, you can unmute yourself now and do that. We haven't done that in the past, but I think it's lovely. So if anybody wants to say something, can kind of just take turns.
Hi, it's me, Nadia.
Hi.
Hi, it
Hi,
was
Nadia.
wonderful. Thank you. Just like Ken, I thought I knew so much about you, and look at you, my cousin. I learn something new all the time. Excellent show. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. It's Kat, and so powerful. I'm just thrilled, and I just wanted to say that I was at Alcatraz in '69.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Thank you, Peggy. It's Claudia. Thank you so much. Only one question. When do you sleep? So good to see your granddaughter also. I knew her as a baby.
Hi, Peggy, this is Kim Walters. Thank you for letting me know about this event. And I'm like all your other friends. I've learned some new things after all these years of knowing you.
Had things on display behind me, different items that I had made. And because Kat, you're here, well, you can't, I don't know if you can see the basket I made in your glass.
Oh, wow.
That was an important part.
I don't know how I get to where you are. Let's see. Wow.
But thank you all for your nice comments and for attending. I really appreciate it.
Bye all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
I hear the helicopters. I've got to go check on what's
Oh,
happening.
no.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Good luck, Kat.
Good luck.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
I don't want to say goodbye. I want more. I know.
Okay, see you later.
Well, you can see us in 2 weeks. We'll have a party. We'll have a good closing party. We can all gather again together. We'll try to make a part of it where we can all talk for that. So we'll try to make more of a social part. So we'll see you all then in 2 weeks on November 29th.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Bye.
Bye.